Umar Khalid has been in jail for more than 1400 days now. Along with 20 others, he has been accused of hatching a conspiracy that led to the deadly Delhi riots in February 2020. Organizing chakka jams, being part of WhatsApp groups, delivering an obnoxious speech in the words of the Delhi High Court. And many other allegations have been leveled against him by the Delhi police. Umar and 20 others have been charged under the draconian anti-terror law UAPA, and Salim Malik, who took part in the anti-CAA protests and helped with food distribution at one of the protest sites, he was 39 years old when he was imprisoned on the same charges as Umar. He is 43 years old now. 4 years have passed. His 4 kids are growing up fatherless. Gulfisha Fatima was 27-year-old and was an aspiring teacher when she was jailed in this larger conspiracy case. Her hopes and dreams are shattered now. If you read the charge sheets in their case, you will notice how the Delhi police has heavily relied upon witness statements to justify their version. News media outlet Scroll had tracked down 2 or 3 of these witnesses, and they told the reporter that the police had coerced them, pressured them to implicate many of the 21 accused in this case. These tactics, fabricating evidence, giving of false evidence, these are widespread in our justice system, and the police usually get away with it. But the credibility of the witness can only be tested during cross-questioning, which takes place at the trial stage. The cases of these political prisoners will take another 5 or 7 or maybe 10 years, we don't know, to reach that trial stage. So in the meanwhile, the law allows them to be enlarged on bail while they await for their trial. But laws like the UAPA, laws like the PMLA make that almost impossible. Yet the courts have found a way today. Very recently there was a bench of the Supreme Court which said that courts can grant bail even under UAPA if there is delay in trial. But will the other bench of the same court accept that judgment? Will they follow that judgment? And even otherwise, what constitutes delay in trial? Is it 2 months of incarceration? Is it 1 year of incarceration? Is it 2 years, or is it 5 years? And whose incarceration is a bigger incarceration? Is it 84-year-old Stan Swamy, who died less than a year in jail asking for a straw and sipper? Or is the incarceration of Salim Malik, who's 4 years in jail, missing out on raising his children, is that a bigger incarceration? I don't know. Speaking of courts, while the regime today is clearly responsible for imprisoning these individuals who dare to speak their mind, the role that the courts are playing also needs to be put on record. What is happening in the case of Delhi riots, larger conspiracy case before the Delhi High Court, is nothing but a great travesty of justice, travesty of the highest order. 3 of these individuals got bail from the Delhi High Court in June 2021. Please follow carefully what I am saying, because this chronology is very important. In June 2021, Devangana Kalita, Natasha Narwal and Asif Iqbal Tana got bail, and thank God for that. The bail order also substantially watered down the UAPA and strictly defined what constitutes terrorist activities so that it is not misused by the state. Of course, this interpretation was quickly stayed by the Supreme Court, but it allowed the 3 individuals to remain out on bail. In the Delhi High Court, Umar filed his bail plea in April 2022. A 2-judge bench headed by Justice Siddharth Mridul, after 5 months, rejected his bail plea. Initially, his bench was very concerned about the word Jumla being used by him against the Prime Minister. Obnoxious speech, the judges had said. Umar challenged this rejection before the Supreme Court, and I will come to what happened to that petition in a few minutes. During the same time, the later half of 2022, 9 other Muslim individuals, after facing a defeat at the lower courts, moved the Delhi High Court seeking bail. The manner in which the Delhi High Court is continues to treat, because most of their petitions have not been disposed of till date. The manner in which the Delhi High Court is treating their petitions is worth noting. The great apathy of the system is at display in their cases. Now, please remember that their cases have moved through 4 benches today. 4 different benches have heard or are hearing his case, their case. All the 8 or 9 individuals who are before the High Court. All of their petitions were initially clubbed together before the same special bench that rejected Umar's bail plea. After listing each of their bail applications anywhere between 34 to 60 times, bail petitions were listed for 34 to 60 times, the bench still failed to pass a judgment. In Mohammed Salim's case, in Salim Malik's case, and in Shifa-ur-Rahman's case, this bench did not pass its judgment for more than 6 months, despite arguments having concluded and judgment reserved. It is unusual, the lawyers had told me when I was reporting on this matter. It mostly does not happen in our courts. But why is it that it is happening in their court? In the meanwhile, the senior judge on the bench, Justice Siddharth Mridul, was made the Chief Justice of Manipur High Court and was transferred. So eventually the bench broke, and all the 9 cases were then sent before a new bench by the end of 2023. This second bench, again a 2-judge bench headed by Justice Suresh Kumar Kaith, did not show any hurry to decide their bail appeals, pending anywhere between 11 to 19 months before the Delhi High Court. Bail petitions have been pending for almost 2 years now. It rejected only Salim Malik's bail plea in April this year. And very interesting, please note this fact, that during the arguments in the case, the bench did not allow his lawyers to argue on the merits of the case. But their judgment rejecting the bail was on merits of the case. We don't know why. The second bench even continued listing those cases where arguments were concluded by both the parties instead of reserving the judgment. When this was brought to the attention of the judges, nothing happened, and we don't know why. Now comes the third bench. The roster of the judges in the Delhi High Court changed in the meanwhile, and the bench therefore broke, and the cases were then shifted before the third bench, and the arguments then would have had to happen all over again. But fortunately or unfortunately, one of the judges recused, and the matter then was sent to the Chief Justice of the Delhi High Court, who again assigned it to the 4th bench. And this 4th bench is again headed by Justice Kaith, along with one other judge who is a new judge. And therefore, I don't know if the case will have to be reheard all over again. 2 days ago, it was reported that this 4th bench has pushed the hearings in Umar's case and the rest of them to the end of August. Now, there is simply no hurry to decide bail applications that are now pending for as long as 26 months. Now, we also know for a fact that earlier this month, the senior judge on this 4th bench, Justice Kaith, was recommended for Chief Justiceship of Jammu and Kashmir High Court. So, in all probability, he will make his way to that High Court, and this 4th bench will again be broken up, and perhaps all these bail petitions will have to go before a 5th bench, which will again have to hear the entire case altogether. And then the entire process will follow. The judgment will be reserved, and we don't know when the judges will deliver their judgment. It must make one think why this is happening. A free mind will think, a critical mind will think. One parliamentarian recently in a speech said that judges of high courts are kowtowing before the Supreme Court Collegium and government of the day for last minute elevations so that they can hold on to judgeship for a longer period of time and perhaps for better positions. This is a parliamentarian saying this on the floor of the House. These are questions that cannot be stopped from being asked through the fear of contempt of court. There is a clear pattern on display today, and therefore I come to the last bit of my talk here, which is of accountability of judges. When one reads the Constituent Assembly debates when the Constitution was being framed, most makers were greatly in favor of vesting the judiciary, particularly the Supreme Court, with great and wide powers. The power to hear any type of case under the sky, the power to do complete justice in any case that it is called upon to decide. There was a great amount of trust that these makers had placed on our judiciary, especially the Supreme Court, of upholding high standards of integrity. This is because there was intense concern about maintaining the purity of judiciary, independence of judiciary, that any executive interference would make the judiciary impure and thus also allow to great deal the judiciary to self-regulate its practice and procedure. There were some others who voiced concerns about the very wide powers being given to the Supreme Court. Some Constituent Assembly members even termed it the Frankenstein monster. Yet the makers did allow the judiciary to self-regulate, vested in the Supreme Court great and wide powers in the hope that they will stand as a beacon of fairness and integrity. But clearly today that hope, that trust has lived out its expiry date. The symptoms of this expired tablet are what we see in Umar's case, in Salim's case, in Gulfishar's case. At the same time, remember that when you read some of the Constituent Assembly debates, you will find that the makers wanted the Parliament to have the final word over such matters. For instance, the Master of Roster Powers, which allows the Chief Justice arbitrary, unaccountable, untrampled powers to allocate cases and constitute benches to their liking. This was never explicitly made a law. It came down as a convention from the colonial courts. Today, this convention is codified in the rules of practice and procedure of the Supreme Court and High Courts. Article 145 of the Constitution allows that the Supreme Court can make its own rules of practice and procedure with the approval of the President. Yet, they are subject to provisions of any law made by Parliament. So, the Parliament has the final say. The Parliament, if it wants, can prescribe regulations, can take away powers of the Master of Roster, which are being used in such manner that we see today. Like they did in Pakistan, our neighboring country took away powers of their Chief Justice of Pakistan. By extension, I also understand that parliamentary committees, being mini parliaments, they can aid in making better policies. Should they also therefore exercise this power of acting as a check on the higher judiciary? What is the harm in a supposedly bipartisan committee representing the will of the people from seeking views and answers from the judges of our higher judiciary? Please don't get me wrong, I am all here for independence of judiciary, and I know that democracy can perhaps not survive without it. But let me quote here the wise words of a member of the Constituent Assembly who said, in response to many members who were asking for greater independence for the Supreme Court, this idea, and I am quoting here, this idea that the Supreme Court has to be somebody which is absolutely separate from every other institution set up by the Constitution is a wholly wrong and mischievous idea. The Supreme Court has to be one of our safeguards. But if it is to be put in a position of hostility to the executive or Parliament, then the power of the Supreme Court will vanish, because after all, it has to depend upon the goodwill of both Parliament and the executive. I would suggest therefore that this idea of independence of the Supreme Court should not be done to death as many members are attempting to do. And therefore, I think it is time that our Parliament looks into this issue of how the judiciary is self-regulating itself. It is time that our parliamentarians ask these questions, maybe introduce motions, maybe our parliamentary committees look into this. And before I just end, I'm just ending here. I will end by saying that the opposition today is making a hue and cry about unfair treatment that the judiciary is meting out, and rightly so, but partly because of the number of political leaders being jailed today. But there's a great difference in the treatment received by a political leader in jail and say a poor tribal woman in state of Chhattisgarh. Many in the latter category often suffer uncountable pains, unfathomable situations in prison due to reluctant or ignorant magistrate, unlike the former category. It is important we realize that unless we, the people, do not talk about this, about judicial conduct, things will not change. I'm afraid that if we don't fix these nuts and bolts, many more Umars will continue to be incarcerated for many more years, and many more Gulfishars will be shattered, and the blame will not just be on the executive that imprisons them or the judiciary that rubber stamps the executive's will, but also on the parliament that lets the status quo be in our judiciary. Our parliamentarians therefore have to step up.